We've seen the for loop, we've seen the while loop. We can improve those both of them actually by we can ask the user how many stars they want. So in this example, we've got this basically an extra line. We've added an extra line at the top where we just ask the user how many stars do you want, using that input function that we've used many times before, and then whatever they type in, we convert that to an integer, to a number, and then we use that in our loop. So while the counter is less than n stars, and then we do exactly the same. The rest of the code is the same. So we can ask them how many they want, and we can do the same with the for loop as well. Again, it's slightly simpler because by the time we get to the loop, we know how many stars we're going to print out. So we've got n stars is how many stars you want. There's the output string is set to having nothing in it, and then for the counter in the range of n stars, whatever they've said, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, we add an extra star in the end and print that out at the end. Why don't we just run that just to show you it? Okay, so if I run this Control-Shift F10, how many stars? If I say 10, I get 10 stars, and so on. Okay, so it's very similar to the first version, except we're giving the user control. Now, you should notice there's some real similarities between the way that the for and the while programs work. Basically, the while code in this case is controlling that counter explicitly. So you'll see that the counter is set to be 0. While the counter is less than n stars, counter plus equals 1. So it's controlling how that value changes by adding 1 to it each time. Whereas in the for case, for counter in range n stars, we're actually using the range function to give us the same values. As it turns out, counter will take the value 0, 1, 2, 3 if the user types in 4. So basically the code is doing the same thing. It's just that in the while case we're explicitly controlling it, whereas in the for case we're using the range function to give us that range of values. So which one should you use? Well, if you're using loops with a counter, it doesn't really matter, but I think for is neater because, as you can see, it keeps all the loop controls in one place. You've just got this range function that's giving you the values you want. And for tends to be used when there's a fixed number. And when I say a fixed number, I don't mean, in this case, in that example, the user can tell us how many they want. So there's 10, but as soon as we know that number, 10, then it's a fixed number. So it's not fixed at the time the program runs. It's fixed as the program runs, but it doesn't change as the loop runs. So we don't halfway through the loop when we've printed out 5 stars, we don't ask them, are you sure, or anything like that, and change the loop. While tends to be used for more uncertain cases. So when the number of repeats of the loop execution is uncertain. So if you think about a game, if you've got 100 characters, you might use a for loop to control to update their positions or something, because you can just run from for counter in range 100, and it would just run the loop 100 times. But in the same game, we don't know how many times the game is going to run, or how long the game is going to run. So maybe each time around the updating all the characters' positions takes, I don't know, it could be a fraction of a second. That could happen millions of times. So we don't know how many of those will happen until the user gets bored of the game, or they win or they lose or something. So that would typically be a while condition. While the game isn't finished, while the user isn't bored, while the user hasn't lost or anything like that, that's when you would use a while. So it's a condition rather than a specific number of times. And some loops are definitely not controlled by counter. For example, as I said, while the arrow key is held down, while a game character is still alive, and for those it would make sense to use while. So in the cases we've just seen, I think the for loop makes more sense, but there's no, you can use whichever suits you best. If you were talking about things where you're not controlling the loop with a counter, then you would probably user while. And you need to be familiar with both. They're really common. They're a very fundamental part of programming, and you should be familiar with both of them. Okay, I'm going to finish this. I'm going to finish this video here, and then we'll get on to look at some other examples.